Welcome back to my animal education series. Today we're doing a video on 6 North American success stories with conservation. Now there's way more than 6 stories, and you guys probably know of several more right off the top of your head than what I'm going to talk about today. But these are just 6 I was able to get ready for this video, and maybe I'll come back to this topic in the future and do another video on it. But without any further ado, let's start off with the gray wolves. For those of you who watched my video with the Potter Park Zoo about the gray wolves, these wolves were hunted to almost near extinction in the United States and Canada in the 1920s. And people saw a lot of negative effects from the wolves not being in their home range anymore, including the elk populations were skyrocketing, and there's even widespread disease within these elk populations. Researchers, biologists, and zoos all work together to manage bloodlines and to carefully breed these wolves and to reintroduce them back to their native home ranges. And according to the Department of the Interior, there is believed to be about 6,000 wolves out in the wild today. The American bald eagle is the national symbol of the United States and has a range from Canada down to northern Mexico. In the 1950s, these bird populations began to rapidly decline due to the introduction of DDT, which is a very popular chemical in a lot of pesticides. Farmers would spray these on their crops, they would run off into the water, where it would get into all of the fish, and then the eagles would come down and eat the fish and absorb it and then lay it with their eggs. And DDT made these eggshells really thin and brittle, where they would often break during incubation, or the baby birds would just simply fail to develop. These eagles were placed under protection from the Endangered Species Act, and a lot of organizations were working really hard to get all pesticides containing DDT banned. They also captured some of these animals and were breeding them in captivity to eventually release back out into the wild into their former ranges. Luckily, these eagle populations were able to reestablish themselves out in the wild, and they're doing better than ever. These eagles and all their birds of prey are still protected under the Eagle Act, the Migratory Bird Act, and the Lacey Act, and that ensures that you're going to see birds of prey and bald eagles for years to come. The next animal is one that I wanted to see out in the wild myself on a trip out to Colorado a few years ago, and I kept a sharp eye out as we drove through the mountains in hopes of seeing one of them, and I never did. But this animal is the Bighorn Sheep. In the 1900s, Bighorn sheep populations began to rapidly decline due to overhunting and diseases that were introduced by livestock. Early on in U.S. history, it is believed that the Bighorn sheep populations was between 150 and 200,000 animals. Now, the plight of the Bighorn sheep was made more popular when the Arizona Boy Scouts started a campaign to help save these animals. And shortly thereafter, other organizations hopped on board and got involved. And they're helping save these animals by introducing strict hunting regulations and limiting interactions between bighorn sheep and livestock. And with all of that, the populations of these bighorn sheep are slowly increasing. Next up on the list is the Blackfooted Ferret, which is a member of the mustelid family. These guys live in the prairie regions of the United States and parts of Canada, and their primary diet is prairie dogs. Now, their populations started to go down in the early 1900s because a lot of the prairie land was being turned into farmland for crops and livestock, and a lot of the farmers were killing off prairie dogs in order to protect their crops and their livestock. And the ferrets are eating only prairie dogs, so with the prairie dog population going down, the ferrets unfortunately followed with them. And then also in the 1940s, the prairie dogs caught the sylvatic plague, which helped further reduce their numbers. Now this is starting to sound more like a segment on prairie dogs than it is black-footed ferrets. It just goes to show how close of a correlation a healthy prairie dog population has with a healthy black-footed ferret population. Because of course, with these ferrets primarily eating prairie dogs, when the prey number of items go down, the predator populations are going to follow down with them. It's actually believed that the black-footed ferret population was extinct out in the wild until 1981, when a group of researchers found a small population out there. And I wasn't exactly able to find when they started reintroducing ferrets back to the wild, but sometime between 2013 and 2016, several organizations worked together to help introduce these animals back to their native ranges. And it's believed that there are around 300 individuals out in the wild today. Now let's take to the skies of California for our next animal. If you guys watch the channel often enough, you'll remember our friend Shelby on Safari told us about the California Condor in the video about celebrating the Species Survival Plan, or the SSP. And its name should tell you its historic range, as it ranges on the western coast of the United States and northern Mexico. And these birds can live up to 60 years out in the wild. Very much like the bald eagle, the California condor's population started to go down in the 20th century due to agricultural fertilizers, lead poisoning, and habitat destruction. And the populations actually got so low in the 1980s that all the animals out in the wild were taken in and put into protected breeding programs. And the organizations that were breeding these animals are able to successfully breed enough animals to re-release these animals back up into their native ranges. Now these animals' populations are starting to grow back out in the wild, but it's still one of the world's rarest birds. The last animal I want to talk about today is the fishers. And I did a video recently about the fishers, and you guys might remember how I was talking about that these animals are extremely elusive and really hard to get videos of. Like most members of the weasel family, these guys are solitary, they are nocturnal, and they live far away from any human populations. Fishers used to roam large portions of North America, but due to hunting, trapping, and habitat destruction, these fishers have lost a lot of their native home ranges. In the corner here is going to be a map of where we think that they are, but as you guys know, with wild animals, they can move wherever they want to be. So that's just a representation of where researchers believe that they could be. In 2002, the National Park Service and local native tribes, along with many other organizations, worked together to go and get fishers from Canada, where they have healthy populations, and bring them back down to the States to re-release them into traditional U.S. habitats. And with all these organizations working together, they were able to re-release 100 fishers back into the United States, and now all these animals are being monitored. I'm really glad that a lot of these animals are making a comeback with increasing populations, and a lot of these organizations and their amazing work allow us to hopefully see these animals for many, many years to come. So if you guys enjoyed this week's video, don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and as always, I will see you next week.